The night sky was ablaze, painted in shades of crimson and violet as the blood moon rose, casting an otherworldly glow over the dense forest. Shadows twisted and lengthened among the gnarled trees, and the wind whispered secrets only the old ones could hear. Somewhere deep within the heart of the pack territory, a prophecy slept in hushed tones, carried by the rustle of leaves and the faint murmur of forgotten spirits. She walked alone, unaware of the threads that bound her to this night. Her footsteps were soft, careful, barely disturbing the fallen leaves beneath her. Even the nocturnal creatures seemed to pause, as if sensing the stirrings of something extraordinary. Her pulse fluttered, not from fear, but from the weight of unseen eyes drawn to the rhythm of her hidden blood. Legends spoke of a girl whose very lineage could shift the balance of power, a girl born under a moon that bled red, her destiny tangled with that of the pack's future alpha. But she did not know this. She only knew the feeling that tonight the world seemed larger, more dangerous, and yet, unbearably alive, high above, the blood moon cast its gaze down like a watchful sentinel. The alpha, strong and enigmatic, prowled the periphery of his territory. His senses, honed through decades of duty and instinct, caught a scent that made his breath hitch, a truth that no one else could perceive. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it demanded attention. The girl, she was not what she seemed. He paused atop the ridge, amber eyes reflecting the scarlet sky. Questions tugged at him, even as his instincts urged caution. Who is she? And why does the forest whisper her name even though no one speaks it? Far below, the girl shivered, her hand unconsciously tracing the pendant hidden beneath her tunic. A relic she did not understand, a link to a power she had yet to claim. The wind seemed to caress her hair, almost protective almost. Guiding her toward something she could not yet see, a low, distant howl rolled across the hills, a signal, a warning, and a promise of what was to come. Somewhere in the shadows, fate had begun its quiet, unrelenting work. The blood moon would witness it all, and the pack would never be the same. Tonight, a secret had awoken, and somewhere in the heart of a powerful alpha, recognition stirred, a bond older than time itself, waiting to be fulfilled. The forest held its breath. The memory of the blood moon lingered in the air, like a promise and a warning intertwined. Dawn was still hours away, yet the girl's heart carried the weight of a destiny she could not yet name, her anonymity feeling suddenly fragile in a world that sensed more than it revealed. The first light of dawn barely filtered through the towering pines, yet the pack territory was already alive with movement. Wolves padded silently through the mist, shifting shapes and scents that carried the unspoken hierarchy of the community. Among them, she moved like a ghost, her presence barely acknowledged, her name whispered only when necessary, and even then, often forgotten. She had grown used to it, the invisible weight of being nobody. To others, she was quiet, unremarkable, almost insignificant. But beneath her calm exterior, there was strength, intelligence, and a fire that had been forged long before she had even understood her own lineage. She had learned to hide it, to blend into the shadows of the pack's bustling gatherings, to never invite attention. Still, the ache of being overlooked never dulled. She lingered at the edge of the clearing, eyes scanning faces as the pack assembled for the morning rituals. Some greeted her with casual nods, but none paused to see her for what she truly was. She tightened her hands, the pang of frustration sharp in her chest. If only they knew. If only they could see the blood that runs through me, the truth I keep buried. Her thoughts were interrupted by the laughter of younger pack members, their teasing sharp and careless. She offered a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. The alpha's gaze, however, swept over the crowd with the effortless authority of someone who knew everything, yet his amber eyes barely lingered on her. That was how it had always been, an unspoken dismissal that burned hotter than any confrontation, and yet there was a strange pull in the air, something unnameable. Even without realizing it, she felt a tug toward the ridge where the alpha often stood alone, surveying the territory. It was not fear, nor was it desire, it was curiosity and perhaps a faint sense of destiny that whispered she could not yet comprehend. A low wind rustled the treetops, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and damp earth. The pack elders murmured among themselves, their voices edged with something she couldn't place. Prophecies, warnings, names. She had heard whispers before, but today they felt closer, more immediate, though she could not decipher their meaning. She pulled her cloak tighter, a shield against the world and its careless judgments. Yet, even in her solitude, she felt the subtle weight of eyes upon her. Not just the casual glances of the pack, but something more, sharp, piercing, and insistent. The Alpha's eyes, she realized with a shiver, were the ones she had felt even from a distance. They searched, always searching, and she could not tell whether they were curious or suspicious. A small sigh escaped her lips, unnoticed among the noise of the pack. "Let them think I am nothing," she told herself, swallowing the hurt. "Let them see what they want." But beneath her calm, her heart beat with anticipation, a restless rhythm she could not quiet. She did not yet know that her life was already entwined with forces she could not see, a destiny that would drag her from the shadows and into the center of the pack's attention, whether she wished it or not. The morning rituals ended, the pack scattering like ripples across the water, but she lingered, her gaze lingering on the empty space where the Alpha had been. In that moment, she felt a subtle shift, a whisper in the wind, a promise of a story yet to unfold, one in which nobody might finally be seen. And somewhere, hidden beneath the forest canopy, the blood moon's memory lingered, coloring the world with the faint glow of destiny. Her solitude was about to be broken. The pack gathering tomorrow promised more than routine hierarchy. It would bring rejection, humiliation, and the first spark of a connection she could not yet understand. The sun had barely risen when the clearing buzzed with the restless energy of the full pack. Wolves shifted into human forms, their movements fluid, controlled, each one aware of the unspoken hierarchy that governed them. She entered quietly, careful to stay at the periphery, hoping the day would pass without drawing attention. She was wrong. The Alpha stood at the center, radiating authority even in the smallest gestures. The tilt of his head, the measured pace of his gaze, the faint gleam of amber eyes that seemed to pierce through the morning mist. Her heart tightened, a mix of fear and fascination she refused to acknowledge. She had been invisible for so long, and yet here she was, acutely aware of his presence, as if it demanded notice. A pack elder stepped forward to address the assembly, and she moved slightly closer, hoping to hear, to belong, even just a little. She felt the weight of eyes on her, whispers skimming her skin like icy tendrils. She tried to stand tall, to make herself smaller in the right places and stronger in the ones that mattered, but it was no use. Then he spoke. "Who is this?" The question was casual, almost dismissive, but the edge in his voice cut sharper than any blade. The pack turned as one, and all eyes fixed on her. She hesitated. Names were meaningless here. They carried no weight. Her voice barely reached beyond a whisper. The Alpha's lips curved into a faint, almost cruel smile. "I don't know her, neither do I care to." A ripple of laughter spread through the assembly. Some were gentle, a few teasing, and others cruel. She felt her cheeks burn. The blood in her veins seemed to pulse hotter than the morning sun, a sharp ache of humiliation. She wanted to shrink into the earth, vanish entirely, and yet she could not. Her mind screamed, "Why does this matter? Why do I care so much about someone who barely knows I exist?" But even as she chastised herself, a tiny ember of curiosity flickered. A strange, impossible pull toward the Alpha, toward the man who had dismissed her with such careless authority. He continued, his gaze sweeping over her as if measuring her worth in a single glance. "Go sit somewhere, out of the way." Her hands clenched at her sides. She obeyed, sinking to the edge of the gathering, every whisper and pointed glance burning into her like frostbite. And yet, something unusual lingered in his eyes, something beneath the dismissal. Recognition, intrigue, she could not tell, though it unnerved her more than the laughter of the pack ever could. The rest of the gathering blurred into a haze of voices and movement. She could barely focus, her thoughts spinning with confusion, embarrassment, and the inexplicable flutter of interest she refused to admit. Even as she tried to make herself invisible, The sense that her life had changed irrevocably gnawed at the edges of her mind. Later, as the pack dispersed and shadows stretched long across the clearing, she lingered, catching the faintest scent that seemed to follow her, sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. The Alpha had left, but the air retained the memory of him, and with it, a tension that neither time nor distance could erase. Her chest ached with humiliation, yes, but also with something more dangerous. Something that whispered of destiny, of truths hidden in blood and moonlight, of a connection she could neither name nor resist. She would not forget this day, not the rejection, not the laughter, not the way he had looked at her, even as he dismissed her, as if he had smelled a truth she did not yet understand. And somewhere in the shadows, the forest seemed to hum in anticipation, aware that the first threads of fate had been pulled, and that the story of a nobody was about to unravel. The whispers of the pack would not fade. Strange glances, old prophecies, and mysterious hints of her lineage would begin to surface, stirring fear, curiosity, and the first flickers of self-discovery. The question was no longer whether she was noticed. It was whether she was ready to be seen. Even after the humiliation of the morning, the forest carried a restless energy. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches whispering secrets she could not quite catch. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl felt weighted, as if the pack itself held its breath. She walked through the early mist, careful to stay unseen, but she could not escape the lingering unease that pressed against her chest. Her mind replayed the Alpha's dismissal. The sting of his words still burned, yet beneath it, an uncomfortable curiosity gnawed at her. Why did he matter so much? Why did his amber eyes cling to her memory like a shadow she could not shake? Then came the whispers, soft at first, almost imperceptible, voices of elders she had passed countless times without acknowledgement. But today, there was something different, an urgency she could not ignore. The blood of the moon, one voice murmured, hidden yet powerful. Another replied, their tones edged with awe and caution. She froze, her pulse quickening. The words were not meant for her ears, and yet they pulled at her like a thread leading to a hidden doorway. Her fingers brushed against the small pendant beneath her tunic, the only relic of a past she barely remembered. Something in it thrummed, faint but insistent, as if it recognized the voices speaking her name even before she did. Fear twisted with a strange thrill. Could it be true? Could the stories the elders whispered, the prophecies, the warnings, the long forgotten legends of a girl born to change the pack's fate, be about her? She had spent her life as nobody, unseen, dismissed, overlooked, and yet now, something in the air suggested she was more than that. She ducked behind the ancient stone wall that marked the edge of the elders' council grounds, straining to hear more. Words like power, bloodline, awakening, floated on the breeze, fragmented and tantalizing. She shivered, both from the chill of the morning and the weight of realization. Am I destined for this? Am I meant for something I do not yet understand? The sensation was disorienting. For so long, she had hidden her abilities, her strength, her secrets, even from herself. And now, the world seemed to pull at her, coaxing her out of the shadows into a place she had never imagined. Her heart pounded when she sensed movement nearby. A figure approached, one of the elders, slow and deliberate. He did not see her at first, or perhaps he chose not to. But as he stopped and lowered his voice, the words were sharp enough to carve into her memory. Her lineage, it cannot remain hidden for long. The pack will sense it, whether she knows or not, and the Alpha. He will know, he always knows. Her stomach twisted, recognition, danger, the warning in his tone left her breathless. She wanted to retreat, to disappear into the woods and leave the weight of destiny behind, but something, some invisible tether, kept her rooted in place. For the first time, she felt the duality of her existence, a quiet life as nobody, invisible and safe, and the dangerous allure of power and truth waiting to awaken. Her mind raced, questions tumbling one over another, yet one thought stood out, sharper than the rest. She was no longer entirely in control of her own story. And somewhere, Deep in the forest, she could feel it. The faint, magnetic pull of eyes that had already recognized her, even before the world had. The Alpha would see her, the elders whispered her truth. And she would have to face it, whether she was ready or not. The wind carried the echoes of prophecy through the trees, brushing against her like a promise. The hidden legacy would not remain hidden forever. The Alpha, who had dismissed her so casually, would soon sense the truth for himself. A recognition deeper than curiosity, one that no denial could suppress, would pull him closer, and set the stage for a bond neither of them could yet comprehend. The forest was alive with the scent of damp earth and pine, but amidst the familiar smells, he caught something different, a faint, elusive scent that made his chest tighten and his instincts scream in a way he had never experienced before. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakably hers. He had dismissed her before, brushed her aside like she were nothing, and yet that scent, her scent, stirred something deep within him, something primal, dangerous, and utterly compelling. It was a truth hidden even from her, something in her blood that called to him across the space of the pack. He moved silently through the trees, careful not to reveal himself, yet drawn irresistibly toward her presence. Every step he took was measured, deliberate, as though the forest itself guided him closer. And then he saw her standing alone, her cloak brushing against the dew. Soaked grass, eyes distant, lost in thought. His amber gaze pinned her in place without her noticing. There was a pull, magnetic and undeniable, that made his pulse quicken. She was extraordinary. That much he knew without question, and the weight of it unsettled him more than he cared to admit. For a moment he simply observed. Her hands traced the pendant hidden beneath her tunic, a relic that hummed faintly, almost as if it recognized his attention. The hair at the nape of his neck rose, the air thickening around him with unspoken tension. He could feel her presence in his bones, in a way no mere mortal could understand. Then she shifted, sensing something intangible, a prickling at the edge of awareness, but she did not see him. He stayed in the shadows, silent, letting her continue unaware, and yet every instinct screamed at him to step forward, to claim, to protect, to know. His inner struggle was fierce. Duty dictated that he maintain distance. She was nobody. Dismissed, overlooked, unimportant in the eyes of the pack hierarchy, and yet instinct, blood, and something older than reason whispered otherwise. He could not deny her, he could not ignore her. He stepped slightly closer, and the scent of her blood grew stronger, intoxicating in its subtle power. Recognition flashed in his mind, a spark that set every nerve on fire. She was connected to something ancient, something dangerous, and yet something that could belong to him. His mind wrestled with the forbidden fascination, the pull that was as irresistible as it was forbidden. To approach her openly would raise questions, stir curiosity, break the careful structure of the pack's order. And yet, leaving her alone felt impossible. From the shadows, he watched her move, the delicate tilt of her head, the way she seemed unaware of her own power, unaware that the very ground beneath her quivered with destiny. For the first time, he understood that nobody was a lie, a mask she had been forced to wear, and the truth demanded recognition. A low growl escaped his throat, half frustration, half warning to himself, not to her. He had never encountered anything like this. She was both threat and temptation, danger and allure, and he was powerless to resist either. The sun climbed higher, scattering the shadows, yet he remained hidden, observing, savoring the pull that made his heart beat faster, that made every rational thought collide with instinct. She was his mystery, his challenge, and, though he dared not admit it even to himself, the start of something he could not yet name, a bond older than reason, waiting for its first spark. And somewhere deep in the forest, the wind carried her scent like a secret, promising that destiny, like the blood moon, would not be denied. The Alpha's fascination would not remain a secret for long. Their paths would cross again, accidentally, dangerously, and every encounter would be charged with tension neither could control. Forbidden glances, subtle touches, and unspoken attraction would begin to weave a dangerous thread between them, one that neither duty nor denial could break. The sun had dipped low, casting long, golden shadows across the pack's territory. The air was thick with the scent of earth and pine, but beneath it, an unspoken tension vibrated, a thread only she and he seemed to feel. She moved cautiously through the clearing, aware of the Alpha's presence even before she saw him. His eyes found her as if drawn by a force she could neither see nor resist. She tried to ignore it, focused on the tasks that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, but every step felt heavy as if the space between them pulsed with electricity. And then it happened. One glance, fleeting but searing. He met her eyes across the gathering, and the world seemed to contract until nothing existed but the heat of his gaze. She stumbled slightly, heart hammering, cheeks flushing, yet he looked away before anyone else could notice, as if careful to conceal the intensity he felt. But she knew, she had felt it in the air, in the brush of wind against her skin, in the subtle vibration that seemed to follow him everywhere. The way he observed her was not casual. It was deliberate, almost painfully aware, like a predator savoring the tension before striking. She hated herself for noticing, for feeling the dangerous thrill that rose in her chest. Every instinct screamed to avoid him, to hide in the shadows, to remain nobody, as she had always been. Yet every step he took closer, or even the possibility that he might be near, pulled her forward, made her heart race, made her pulse burn in ways she did not understand. For his part, he wrestled with restraint. Duty dictated distance. The pack's eyes, ever watchful, expected propriety and control. Yet the pull toward her was undeniable. Her scent, her presence, the faint aura of hidden strength. He could not ignore it. Every accidental brush of her hair in the breeze, every fleeting look, struck at the part of him that had long been disciplined, cautious, unwavering. The tension between them grew, subtle and dangerous, a silent dance that no one else could see. She felt it when he lingered too long at the edge of her peripheral vision. He felt it when her gaze betrayed a curiosity, a challenge, even fear mingled with fascination. Neither could speak, yet both were caught in the gravity of the unspoken. A laugh from the younger pack members jolted her from the moment, and she lowered her eyes, trying to steady herself, but he did not look away. His presence was a constant pull, a weight she could neither ignore nor escape. Every time their paths crossed, even by accident, it was charged with unspoken electricity, a dangerous tension that threatened to ignite. She hated the vulnerability, the awareness of being seen so clearly. And yet, she could not deny the way it made her chest ache, the way it stirred a strange mixture of fear and desire. He was a forbidden presence, a force she could neither name nor resist, and every glance, every subtle brush of intent made the danger more tantalizing. By the time the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in molten gold and crimson, the tension between them had woven an invisible thread, delicate, fragile, yet unbreakable. It connected them in ways neither wanted to admit, a bond that whispered of power, destiny, and desire that refused to be denied. She left the clearing that evening with a lingering awareness of him, of the pull she could neither resist nor understand. And somewhere deep in the forest, he watched her retreating figure, torn between duty and temptation, unable to stop the slow, burning fire that had been ignited by a single glance. The danger of their connection was only beginning to reveal itself. The tension that had been simmering would soon take shape as whispers of danger surfaced. A rival, a hidden threat, would seek to exploit her bloodline, testing her secrecy and her ability to survive, and forcing the Alpha to confront his protective instincts more directly. Night had fallen over the pack territory, draping the forest in silver and shadow. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant wood smoke. Normally, the darkness was a comfort, a familiar cloak beneath which she could move unseen. Tonight, however, it felt different, thick with unease, as if the shadows themselves were whispering warnings she could not fully understand. She moved cautiously, her cloak brushing the forest floor, eyes scanning every rustle and shimmer. Something was off, The wind carried strange scents, unfamiliar yet faintly threatening, hinting at a presence she could not yet pinpoint. Her instincts pricked, sharp and insistent, a warning she could not ignore. It was then she noticed the first sign, a piece of parchment pinned to the bark of an ancient oak. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, and cruel. "The blood you hide will soon be claimed. Beware who watches in the shadows." Her heart jumped, the words burning themselves into her mind. Someone knew, or suspected, what she had spent a lifetime concealing. Her bloodline, her power, her hidden strength. All of it was no longer safe. Panic pressed at the edges of her mind, but she forced herself to breathe, to move silently, to remain unseen. Whoever had left the warning was clever, stalking from the edges, waiting for her to slip, to make herself vulnerable. She could feel it in the forest, the presence lingering, hidden but patient. And then, in the periphery of her vision, she sensed him. The Alpha. He had been tracking her from the shadows, his senses alert, his body taut with controlled energy. She froze, half relieved, half frightened. His gaze met hers, and without a word, she understood. He knew danger was near. "He always knew you shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice low, commanding, carrying an edge that made the hairs on her arms rise. She began, but he cut her off with a shake of his head. "No explanations, just stay close." It was not protection as the pack understood it. It was something older, instinctual, unyielding, something that surged in his blood at the scent of hers, the recognition of what she carried, the undeniable pull between them that no rules could suppress. As they moved through the shadows together, she realized the forest itself seemed to conspire around them. Every rustle, every faint movement suggested eyes hidden in darkness, watching, waiting, assessing. Whoever was behind this knew her bloodline, and they intended to exploit it. Her pulse quickened, not just from fear, but from the closeness of the Alpha. Every step beside him was charged, a tension she could neither hide nor escape. The warmth of his presence, the strength radiating from him, made her heart hammer in ways that frightened her more than any threat lurking in the forest. "You're in danger," he murmured, almost to himself, eyes scanning the darkness. "And I won't let anyone touch you." It was a promise, a warning, a confession, all rolled into one. She swallowed hard, unable to respond, knowing that whatever was coming would test not only her ability to remain hidden, but also the fragile, forbidden bond that had begun to grow between them. The shadows shifted again, and she realized she was not alone. Danger was waiting, patient, cunning, and relentless. The forest seemed to tighten around them, pressing in, as if it understood the stakes better than she did. And somewhere, in the dark heart of the trees, the first moves of a rival's plan were being set in motion. Threads that would pull her out of hiding, force her strength to the surface, and push the Alpha into a role he could no longer deny, her protector. The threat would not remain hidden for long. Soon, a rival would challenge her openly, testing her strength and resolve, and the Alpha's protective instincts would escalate into action. Their bond, once subtle and forbidden, would become impossible to ignore. Dawn broke over the pack's territory, pale light spilling across the forest like a fragile promise. She approached the gates of the central clearing, her steps cautious, the weight of last night's warning still heavy on her shoulders. The forest around her seemed unnervingly quiet, as if it too held its breath for what was about to happen. And then she saw him, a rival, tall, confident, and dangerous, standing at the gates with a smug smile that made her stomach twist. His eyes, sharp and calculating, swept over the clearing before landing on her. Recognition flickered there, but not the kind that offered respect. It was the kind that smelled opportunity, weakness, and the desire to exploit it. Her heart hammered, but she stood her ground. She had spent her life hiding, blending into the shadows, and yet here he was, threatening to pull her into the light for all the pack to see. The Alpha arrived shortly after, stepping from the shadows with a fluid, predatory grace. His eyes locked onto the rival, and she could feel the tension radiating from him in waves. "You shouldn't be here," the Alpha said, his voice low but carrying enough authority to make the rival hesitate. The man smirked, not intimidated in the slightest. "I came for her," he said, his gaze sliding over her as though she were property to be claimed. The pack doesn't need a nobody, but blood like hers. It's valuable. I intend to take advantage of it. A cold wave of fear surged through her chest, but beneath it, anger coiled. I am not a prize to be claimed, she thought, straightening her back, meeting his gaze with as much defiance as she could muster. The Alpha stepped closer, his presence magnetic, his body a living shield between her and the threat. Every instinct screamed that he would not let this man harm her. And yet, even as his protective energy radiated outward, she could feel something more, a longing, a recognition that went beyond duty. You will not touch her, the Alpha growled, and the words carried through the clearing like a blade. The rival laughed sharp and mocking. And what are you going to do about it? You think you can stop me? The Alpha's eyes narrowed, amber flames igniting in the morning light. He moved forward with deliberate precision, positioning himself between her and the rival. The forest seemed to lean in, shadows stretching, as if nature itself anticipated the coming clash. You forget your place, the Alpha said, his tone cold, unwavering. She is under my protection. The words were simple, but the power behind them was undeniable. Every member of the pack felt the shift in authority, the weight of his presence pressing down, making it clear that challenge would not be tolerated. The rival faltered for the first time, uncertainty flickering in his eyes as he assessed the Alpha's resolve. But he did not retreat. He could not afford to show weakness. The tension coiled dangerous and electric, ready to snap. She felt the pull between them, herself, the Alpha, the rival like threads of fate tightening around her chest. And in that moment, she realized that her secrecy, her careful hiding, had come to an end. The danger was real, the challenge public, and the Alpha's protection had become more than a subtle promise. As the forest held its breath and the morning sun climbed higher, the first battle lines were drawn, not with weapons, but with presence, power, and unspoken stakes. The rival may have come to exploit her bloodline, but he would soon learn that she was not alone. And the Alpha, for the first time, made it undeniably clear. Anyone who threatened her would have to face him first. The confrontation at the gates would escalate, driving them into the forest itself, where danger would strike more personally. Alone beneath the moon, the heroine would face a life-threatening situation, forcing the Alpha to reveal the raw intensity of his power and setting the stage for trust and intimacy. Night had swallowed the forest, draping the trees in Inkai shadows and silvered moonlight. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth, but beneath it lingered danger, a presence that made her skin prickle and her heart pound in warning. She moved cautiously, every step deliberate, her senses straining. The confrontation at the gates had left her shaken, and now, alone, the forest felt far too vast, too unpredictable. Every rustle, every whisper of wind seemed amplified, and instinct told her she was being watched. Then it happened. A sharp, guttural growl erupted from the darkness, and a figure lunged from the shadows. She barely had time to react, stumbling backward as the threat lunged again, teeth bared, eyes wild. Fear surged through her, raw and consuming, but there was no time to run. She had to survive. Before panic could paralyze her, a presence like fire erupted beside her, the Alpha. Strong, commanding, and impossible to ignore, he moved with fluid precision, intercepting the threat with a single, effortless motion. The forest seemed to hold its breath as he stood between her and danger, his amber eyes blazing with unrestrained power. "Stay behind me," he commanded, voice low and lethal, carrying an authority that left no room for defiance. She obeyed, heart hammering not just from fear, but from the proximity of him, the intensity of his presence, the raw, magnetic energy that seemed to radiate from every fiber of his being. Even in the shadows, she could feel it. Power, protection, and attention she had never known could exist in a single person. The rival, or creature, circling them hissed, eyes glinting with malice. The Alpha's stance shifted, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. He moved faster than she could follow, every movement precise, controlled, deadly. She watched, awestruck, as he neutralized the threat, his strength undeniable, his focus unwavering. When the danger had passed, the forest was silent again, save for their ragged breathing. She dared to glance at him, and for a moment the world shrank to just the two of them. The firelight, or rather moonlight, caught his profile sharp and commanding, and she felt something inside her shift. "You're reckless," he said, tone softened, but the edge of concern was unmistakable. "You shouldn't be out here alone." I thought I could handle it," she murmured, voice trembling despite her attempt at composure. Her chest still burned from adrenaline from fear, and she realized something else, something that had tightened in her chest the moment he had appeared. He stepped closer, just enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him. "You are not meant to face this alone," he said, softer now, almost a whisper, but laden with an intensity that made her pulse spike. "Not ever." Her breath caught. Every instinct told her to step back, to hide, to maintain the fragile distance they had been dancing around for days. Yet the pull toward him, the undeniable magnetic connection, was impossible to resist. For a moment, the world narrowed to their shared heartbeat, the rhythm of danger and survival, the subtle brush of proximity that made her aware of every detail, every rise and fall of his chest, every flicker of emotion in his eyes. "You trust me," he said, a statement, not a question, and in that moment she realized she did. More than she had ever trusted anyone, more than she had trusted herself. The forest seemed to exhale, the danger gone, yet the tension remained more intimate, more dangerous than ever. And in the darkness beneath the moon, something unspoken had shifted between them. A bond of protection, trust, and desire, fragile but undeniable. The night was quiet again, but she knew one thing with certainty: the Alpha's presence would not just protect her. It would claim her heart, whether she wanted it or not. The moment of danger had forged a connection between them, but trust would soon be tested. Betrayal was coming. Someone close would reveal secrets, putting her bloodline at risk and thrusting both her and the Alpha into chaos. The moon hung high, silver and cold, casting long shadows across the pack's territory. The night air was sharp, carrying scents that usually comforted her, the earthy forest, the distant smoke, but tonight it reeked of deceit. Every rustle, every movement seemed loaded with menace, a whisper of something she could not yet see. She had believed, perhaps foolishly, that the forest could hide her secrets, that the danger she had faced earlier could remain contained, known only to her and the Alpha. But trust, she learned tonight, was a fragile thing. A familiar voice called from behind, casual, friendly, the kind that hid venom beneath its warmth. "I thought I'd find you here," said her so-called ally, stepping from the shadows with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She felt a chill run down her spine. Something in his stance, in the way he spoke, set her teeth on edge. Before she could react, he produced a small, intricately carved talisman, a relic she had kept hidden, one that connected her bloodline to ancient power. "You shouldn't keep things from the pack," he said lightly, almost teasingly, but the intention was clear, especially things that could change the balance. Her chest tightened. What are you doing?" she demanded, fear and anger intertwining. He shrugged, infuriatingly casual, "Just making sure the right people know. The Alpha will want to see this." The world seemed to tilt. Betrayal was a cold blade slicing through her chest, sharper than any enemy she had faced in the forest. Someone she had trusted, relied upon even, had exposed her secrets, not for protection, but for leverage, for gain. Her eyes darted to the shadows, to the familiar figure watching silently. The Alpha had arrived, drawn by instinct, by scent, by the undeniable thread that connected them. His amber eyes burned with fury, scanning the scene, and when they locked on her, there was an unspoken question. "Are you safe? I warned you," he said, voice low, resonating with authority and danger. "You cannot trust everyone here." The rival, no, the traitor, smirked, stepping back to allow the Alpha's gaze to fall fully upon him. "Seems she isn't as invisible as she thought," he said, amusement twisting his tone. "Your bloodline is remarkable, but very, very dangerous. I thought the pack should know." The Alpha moved, a silent force that radiated power and protection. Every muscle, every gesture screamed dominance, warning the pack and the traitor alike that the balance had shifted. And yet, amidst the fury, she noticed something else. The magnetic pull she had felt before, the forbidden tension, the connection that defied rules, had deepened. He was not just her protector. He was her anchor, her force against betrayal. "You will not threaten her again," the Alpha growled, stepping closer, positioning himself between her and the traitor. His presence was a living shield, a declaration, a promise. The pack, watching, fell silent, recognizing the authority in his stance and the gravity of the revelation. She swallowed hard, the weight of exposure pressing down on her. The betrayal had stripped her anonymity, but it had also cemented the truth she had hidden for so long. Her bloodline could not remain secret. And the Alpha's recognition of it, of her, of the danger, was undeniable now. Her chest ached, not just from fear, but from the surge of relief and longing at his proximity. Even amid chaos, his presence was a tether, grounding her, commanding her, igniting a fire she could not deny. The traitor, sensing the shift in power, hesitated, and in that moment, the Alpha's dominance was absolute, but the damage was done. Secrets had been revealed, trust had been shattered, the pack was unsettled, and she felt the fragile web of her hidden life unraveling beneath the moonlight. And somewhere, deep in the forest, the shadows seemed to lean closer, hungry, aware that the first moves in a larger game had begun, and that she was no longer invisible. The Alpha would soon confront the rival and the pack directly, asserting dominance and protecting her while acknowledging her hidden power. The stakes would escalate to their peak, setting the stage for public recognition of her bloodline and their bond. The clearing was alive with tension, every member of the pack alert, every scent sharp and heavy in the cool morning air. Word of the betrayal had spread, and whispers of her bloodline raced through the pack like wildfire. Eyes darted toward her as she stepped forward, heart pounding, every nerve on edge. She had never felt more exposed, and yet, standing at her side, the Alpha radiated a calm authority that belied the storm brewing in his amber eyes. He did not glance at her with pity or hesitation. He looked at her with recognition, with a focus that made her chest tighten. She was not nobody, anymore, not to him, and soon not to the pack. The rival, emboldened by the whispers and the uncertainty of the pack, stepped forward. "You hide power that should be mine to control," he spat, his tone sharp, venomous. "Your bloodline is dangerous, I claim it." The Alpha's gaze snapped to the man, and the forest seemed to still in anticipation. Every movement of the Alpha radiated danger, a silent but deadly promise. "You will not touch her," he said, low and lethal, every word resonating through the clearing. "Not now, not ever." The rival sneered, but the pack's energy had shifted. Whispers faded to silence as the Alpha moved forward, body taut and commanding. Every step drew the pack's attention. Every flick of his gaze communicated authority beyond words. He positioned himself directly between her and the rival, a living shield of power and presence. "You underestimate her," the Alpha continued, voice growing stronger, carrying over the murmurs of the pack. "She is more than you, or anyone, believes. Her bloodline is not yours to claim. It is hers, and I will protect it." The rival's bravado faltered, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. The Alpha's power was undeniable, a force the pack felt in every hair on their necks, in every whisper of the wind. The forest itself seemed to lean closer, drawn into the Alpha's assertion, as if nature recognized the truth of his words. She felt her chest tighten, not just from fear or adrenaline, but from the overwhelming sense of being seen, fully and without pretense. The Alpha's words were not just protection, they were recognition. She was no longer invisible, she was no longer nobody. The rival, realizing he could not match the Alpha's dominance, took a step back. "This isn't over," he muttered, venom in his tone but caution in his eyes. The threat lingered, but the immediate danger had passed. The Alpha's gaze shifted to her, amber eyes softening just enough to break the edges of the fear that had gripped her since the betrayal. "Do you understand now?" he asked, his tone low, intimate, yet commanding. "You are powerful, your bloodline. It is yours, and I will not allow anyone to take it from you." Her voice trembled as she nodded, the weight of his acknowledgement settling over her like a protective cloak. I understand," she whispered. The pack, witnessing the confrontation, fell silent, absorbing the Alpha's dominance and the undeniable importance of her lineage. Whispers of awe and respect rippled through them, and she realized that her place among them had shifted irrevocably. She was no longer overlooked. She was recognized, and the bond between her and the Alpha was now impossible to ignore. Even as the forest returned to its natural rhythm, the memory of the confrontation lingered like a pulse in the air. She felt the Alpha's presence beside her, steady and unwavering, and knew that whatever threats remained, she was no longer alone. The bond between them, forged in tension, danger, and unspoken recognition, had become undeniable. And somewhere in the quiet of the forest, the ancient bloodline that had remained hidden for so long stirred, awakened by the Alpha's acknowledgement, ready to step fully into the world. With the Alpha's challenge ending the immediate threat, her lineage would finally be revealed to the entire pack. Social dynamics would shift, her importance cemented, and the bond with the Alpha would move from tension into recognition and acceptance. The morning sun cut through the mist, illuminating the clearing where the pack had gathered. Silence hung heavily in the air, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional shifting of paws. Every eye was fixed on her, the whispers of last night still echoing in the minds of those who had heard of her bloodline. She stepped forward, heart pounding, every nerve alive with anticipation and fear. For the first time in her life, she was no longer invisible. Every glance, every murmur carried weight. The pack looked at her not as nobody, but as something more, something powerful, important, and dangerous. The Alpha stood beside her, tall, unwavering, and impossibly magnetic. His amber eyes met hers, and she felt both grounded and exposed under their intensity. He had defended her publicly, asserted her power, and now his presence seemed to claim her entirely, though wordlessly, in a way that no one else could comprehend. One of the elders stepped forward, a scroll in hand, his voice steady but carrying reverence. The prophecies have long spoken of a bloodline hidden among us, one whose power could change the fate of this pack. Today, we confirm what was whispered in shadows. The blood of the moon runs through her veins. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eyes widened. Some bowed. Others muttered in awe or disbelief. She felt the weight of their recognition press down on her, a mix of fear, pride, and relief washing over her in waves. The Alpha's hand brushed against hers, almost instinctively, and a shiver ran through her. No words were necessary, the touch spoke volumes. He had recognized her long before the pack did. He had seen through the guise of nobody and acknowledged her strength, her lineage, her power. "You are not a shadow to be overlooked," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "You are the bloodline the pack has awaited, and you are mine to protect." Her breath caught, the weight of his words, the intensity of his gaze, and the undeniable pull between them made her chest ache. She had spent so long hiding, blending into the background, afraid of what recognition might bring. Now, with the truth laid bare, she realized she could never go back. The pack murmured, some stepping closer, others bowing slightly in respect. Their acknowledgement of her lineage shifted everything, the hierarchy, the power dynamics, the way she moved, breathed, existed among them. She was no longer nobody. She was vital, central, destined. As the murmurs subsided, the Alpha's hand lingered near hers, a tether of protection and desire. Every instinct, every heartbeat screamed that this bond, the one forged in secrecy, danger, and stolen glances, was undeniable. She could not hide from it, nor did she want to. For the first time, she allowed herself to meet his gaze fully, letting the mix of relief, pride, and longing shine through. In that moment, everything shifted. Her secret, once a burden, became her strength. Her bond with the Alpha, once forbidden and tentative, became clear, irrevocable. The forest around them seemed to exhale, the morning light blessing the revelation, acknowledging her power, her heritage, and the undeniable connection between her and the Alpha. She was no longer a shadow. She was seen, she was recognized, she was home, and as the pack watched, the Alpha stepped closer, closing the distance with deliberate care, his presence a living promise. The world had shifted beneath their feet, and in that shifting, fragile space, the first threads of their future together were woven, strong, unyielding, and entirely theirs. With her bloodline revealed and her place in the pack recognized, the bond with the Alpha could no longer be denied. The final chapter would explore their union, emotional fulfillment, and the ultimate resolution of romance, trust, and destiny. The sun had begun its descent, casting the forest in molten gold and soft shadows. The pack gathered in the clearing, the air humming with anticipation and quiet awe. The revelation of her bloodline had shifted everything, but there was one truth that remained unspoken yet undeniable, the bond between her and the Alpha. She stood at the edge of the clearing, heart racing, pulse echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. Every eye in the pack was upon her, yet it was the Alpha's gaze that held her utterly captive. His amber eyes searched hers, steady and unwavering, filled with a depth of recognition and longing that stole her breath. He stepped forward, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Every other sound, the whispers, the rustling trees, the distant calls of the pack, faded, leaving only the rhythm of their hearts and the pull that had grown between them from the first glance, the first brush of proximity, the first shared danger. "You have always been more than nobody," he said, his voice low and rich, vibrating with emotion. "I have known it from the moment I first sensed you, and now I claim you as your mate, as the keeper of your heart, as the one who will stand with you through everything." Her breath caught. The words, spoken with authority and tenderness, sent a shiver of longing and relief through her. For so long, she had hidden, uncertain, alone, afraid that her bloodline would mark her for danger or isolation. Now, with his words, the fear dissolved, replaced by the warmth of acceptance, protection, and love. The Alpha moved closer, his presence enveloping her like sunlight and shadow intertwined. When he reached her, his hand brushed hers, fingers curling around hers with a weight of possession that was both gentle and commanding. Every instinct in her body responded, every hidden desire awakened, and she realized that this bond, this mate bond, was no longer something to resist. It was inevitability, destiny, and salvation all at once. I am yours," she whispered, voice trembling, heart full, completely. A small, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. "And I am yours," he replied, voice steady, certain, unwavering. His hand moved to cup her cheek, thumb brushing against her skin in a tender, deliberate motion. Forever. The pack watched, silent and reverent. This was more than a declaration of a bond. It was the culmination of destiny, the recognition of power, and the promise of unity. The forest seemed to lean closer, the fading sunlight painting them in hues of gold, acknowledging the union, blessing it silently. He drew her close, the world narrowing to the press of bodies, the warmth of shared breath, the rhythm of two hearts aligning as one. She pressed against him, feeling the strength, the protection, and the fierce devotion that radiated from every fiber of his being. Every fear, every doubt of her past life, melted away in the intensity of the moment. "I've waited for this," he murmured against her hair, voice rough with emotion, "waited for you, for us." "And I've waited for you," she replied, closing her eyes, letting herself fall completely into him, into the promise of what they were meant to be. "I never want to be alone again." The forest exhaled around them, shadows and sunlight mingling as the Alpha tightened his hold, and the unspoken magic of their bond thrummed through the clearing. For the first time, she felt fully seen, fully loved, and entirely whole. As the pack silently acknowledged their union, she knew that nothing could ever challenge this. Her bloodline, her destiny, her heart, and her mate were united. The Alpha pressed a final, lingering kiss to her forehead, a gesture both possessive and tender, and in that instant, the world felt still, complete, and irrevocably theirs. The sun dipped lower, bathing the clearing in warmth, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that now belonged as much to her as to him. Together, they faced the future, not as shadows or secrets, but as mate and Alpha, as partners, as soul, bound hearts ready to claim the life that had always been waiting for them. The forest, the pack, and the bloodline had finally acknowledged it. And in that perfect golden moment, she whispered softly, "I am yours completely." "And I am yours," he replied, voice rich with promise, sealing their bond for all time.